I'd like to call this meeting of the Knoxville Area Transportation Planning Organization to order. The first order of business is determination of a quorum. We have that correct, Doug?
Yes.
Okay. Could everybody please go around the table and introduce ourselves? I know we have at least one new person here. Welcome, Commissioner Chairperson Oster. So if you don't mind, could we please start over here?
Megan Brooks, City of Alcoa for Mayor Martin.
Don Walker, Blount County for Mayor Mitchell.
Dallas DeArmond, Knoxville, Knox County Planning.
Billy Pickle, Loudoun County Road Superintendent, here for Mayor Bradshaw.
Jack Walls here for Jeff Harris.
Brian Boone, City of Maryville for Mayor Andy White.
Mayor Ron Williams, Farragut.
Doug Burton, TPOe Coordinator.
I'm Glenn Jacobs, Mayor of Knox County.
India Kincannon, Knoxville Mayor.
Justin Biggs, ETDD.
Isaac Thorne, Director, Knoxville Area Transit.
Larry Gann, Vice Mayor Clinton.
Gina Oster, Knox County Chair Commission.
Troy Embry-Tidot, Region 1, Office of Community Transportation for Governor Bill Lee.
Matt Meservey, Tennessee Department of Transportation. I'm the Planning Director.
Thank you. Do we have anyone on Zoom?
We have Drew Rutherford and Savannah Robertson on Zoom.
Okay, great, thank you. Are there any amendments to the agenda? So seeing none, we'll move forward. We need to approve the minutes of the July 24th, 2024 meeting. You all should have gotten those in your packet. So is there a motion to approve?
Motion approved. Second.
Any questions, corrections, et cetera? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Doug, do you want to take this over and run through the rest of the things here, please?
Sure. Item number 3 is the memorandum of agreement for the funding swap. There's a memorandum of agreement. It is in your packet. This came to the board last month. Members from TDOT came forward and did a presentation about the importance of this. At that time, we did not have a exact MOA. The executive board did make a motion and pass the concept of being in agreement with the funding swap, but today we're bringing you forward the MOA, and they did a pretty extensive presentation. I just have a couple of slides, and I know there's a few of you that weren't here, so I'll try to boil it down to what this all involves. Like I said, the funding swap concept was brought in front of the executive board last meeting, and the executive board passed a motion to endorse the concept. But what this involves is every year the TPO receives an allocation of funds. And by example, our STPG, we get about $13 million worth of funds. Now, that sounds like a lot of money, but when you're dealing with transportation projects, it's not a lot of money. So from time to time, in order for us to pay for larger projects, the balance begins, we kind of save that money up. The balance begins to build up. The other issue is it just takes a long time to get projects done. It can take 3, 5 to 7 years to get a road project built. So while that's going on, our balances kind of build up. So that can be an issue due to 2 things. Next slide, please. Every August, the federal government looks around and sees which states have not spent their obligation. If there are some, they will redistribute those to other states in needs. So often Tennessee does get additional money around August. And so if we have a large balance, the federal government's going to look at that and say, well, maybe Tennessee is not as big of need for funding as they say they are, so we may not get as much funding. The other thing is right now, as you all know, there's lots of federal grants going on, and we kind of heard behind the scenes, one of the things they do look at is before we award some money to a jurisdiction in Tennessee, we will check and see, are they sitting on large balances? So we do not want to lose out on some potential grant funding because we're sitting on these balances. So TDOT came forward with the concept that they can use our money and then be able to be in a position to quickly pay it back when we need it, and that would keep our balances down. So they created this MOA, which sets forth the creation of how they would use our money and then repay it back, how it would be monitored. And one thing I didn't realize when we did this last time, this will set in place an ongoing process. I was kind of under the assumption it was a one-time funding swap, But it does make sense because the balances will build right back up in a couple of years. And there's no need to put the board back through, this whole discussion if we can go ahead and put in place a regular process, which if the balances build back up, then TDOT can take it. We don't have to go back through approving it all. Next slide. Part of the process is TDOT and TPOe will evaluate the status of the projects. When they decide that they want to move some money, we will bring the list of what projects we're going to swap to the board for our consideration. And then also, we will be monitoring it. The funds will stay in our area. It's not a situation where they're going to take our funds and move them to Memphis or Nashville. The funds will be used in our area in accordance with the projects in our TIP. And as I said, TDOT is putting forth a system where we can monitor this in real time. We'll know what the balances are, and we can get regular updates. The final thing, and this was added on there, is this doesn't really deal with the funding swap per se, but TDOT is making a commitment that they will work within their local programmings to figure out ways to help keep the balances down, how to move projects through faster. And they'll also work with the local jurisdictions to see if there's things that we can do on our side. And that way, hopefully, then the balances won't build up to this extent. And I know from time to time, I've been here 35 years, it seems to come up every 3 or 4 years about the balances being too much. And then we go through a process of seeing how TDOT or the local jurisdictions can better manage their processes to keep the balances down. And then I guess as things settle down, the efforts kind of fade away. I think TDOT is really serious this time about addressing these issues and getting a system in place that will help us keep the balances low. So that's kind of a quick overview. Like I said, I know a couple of you weren't here. We have willing to take questions, or TDOT staff's here to help. If not, we need a recommendation to pass the MOA.
Are there any questions or further discussion? Okay, is there a motion? Oh, so I'm sorry. Okay, is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
I did want to say that because of all the efforts of you all and the rest of the state with this concept of a plan, we were able to actually receive $371 million in August redistribution already. And that's typically somewhere around 40 to 60. So again, thank you very much for everything that you've done to make this happen. And we've already seen the fruits of this labor. So
That's great. Thank
I was
you.
going to say that for my other business, but
That's good.
It was timely.
You can say it twice. It sounds really great. Okay. Moving forward, this midpoint performance measure target adjustments related to the FHWA PM3 subpart G traffic congestion area. Senators Mike Conger from TPOe. Mike.
Good morning. Yeah, that's a mouthful. This is another action item for your consideration today. So a quick background on performance measurement management process. This was initiated by the Federal Highway Administration several years ago. Purpose is to track their investments in a more accountable and transparent fashion. So it's an ongoing thing where measures are established and then targets are set for those by the states for the funding that the states receive from Federal Highway. And then they must report on the progress toward meeting those targets in each case. And these are tied to 7 national goal areas, like primarily safety and congestion and things like that. So they've done this through federal rulemaking and federal regulations. There's all these subparts here addressing different performance measure areas tied to the specific funding sources. These are a lot of acronyms, so the funding sources that you do have acronym list in your packet. There's safety, and NHPP is a big one. So these are organized into 3 main areas, PM1, 2, and 3. PM1 are the safety targets that we deal with annually. PM2 and 3 are a 4-year process. PM2 are the bridge and pavement condition on the National Highway System. And then PM3 are several different ones, mainly looking at congestion and freight and emissions, environmental things. So today we're only talking about subpart G, and we're in the second 4-year performance period for that. And where we are right now is this mid-performance period. So the 4-year targets were established a couple of years ago, and with that, we are allowed TDOT, and we are allowed to adjust those targets at the midpoint if we feel it's appropriate. So that's what we're doing today. So Subpart G is unique, whereas the other targets are statewide targets, but this is only applicable to urbanized areas that have 200,000 population and include an air quality maintenance area. So we are subject to air quality for PM 2.5 and ozone. So we are tasked with setting a specific target for the Knoxville TPO urbanized area. And usually in the other ones, if you've been here before, it's a statewide target. We've just been endorsing the statewide target for things like safety and bridge and pavement condition. But on this one, we worked together with TDOT staff to look at the data for the urban area. And this, again, is a unique target for us. So 2 years ago, we set these targets, and the 2 and 4 year targets we set at the same level. For these 2 parts of Subpart G, one is peak hours of excessive delay, and the other is percent of non-single occupancy vehicle travel. I'll talk about each of those now. So peak hour excessive delay, this is only for the national highway system. It's kind of hard to see here, but these are your major roads, all the interstates, Alcoa Highway, Kingston Pike, anything that's a principal arterial. You got US 321 and 411 Maryville, those types of roadways is all this applies to. So peak hour excessive delay is defined as travel at 60% of the posted speed limit. So example would be if it's 65 miles per hour, anything at 39 miles per hour or below is considered excessive delay. And it's using big data. It adds all this up. It's tracked over time and summed for the PM and AM peak periods. So we don't have to do this calculation ourselves. It's actually in this online data source known as RIDIS. So this map actually allows us to look at road by road segment of this peak hour excessive delay. And so I just looked at some of the primary corridors. As you would imagine, the I-40-75 combined corridor from the split near Loudoun County to 640, by itself, it accounts for around 25% of the peak hour excessive delay. This is how it's calculated down here, the total number of hours divided by population. This is how the number is derived for 2023. So this is why, TDOT's looking at that corridor right now, doing a special study for that. It's obviously one of the major areas of congestion. This also applies, those corridors like Kingston Pike and Broadway, and then Broadway Avenue and Maryville. We're trying to tackle that. Signal timing is a big factor with that. Farragut's doing a ATMS, Advanced Traffic Management System. I don't know if it's fully deployed at this point, but it's getting close. And so Maryville's done that, and City of Knoxville's coming along, hopefully soon, looking at Kingston Pike and Broadway first, and then several other corridors as well. So this is how we're looking at this information. To set the target, this is historical trend data back to 2017. Of course, we saw the big dip in 2020 when nobody was on the roads practically. So that was good for congestion, but we're bouncing back up. And we actually hit that exact number for the 2 year target of 10.8. This is the 4 year target at the same level. But when we look at the actual data so far, we can, go back. It's hard to see, but compared month to month, 2024 to 2023, we're already seeing in 2024, we're getting worse. And so the way the target was set was just, we looked at the monthly average of about 0.9 hours times 12. That derived the 10.8. We're looking it's more like 1 hour average. So multiply that by 12 and you get the revised target we're suggesting of 12.0 up here. So that's our proposed adjustment for that factor.
Before we leave that
we could take
one,
questions.
could you go back to that
Yeah.
last slide? I guess, are these projections or are these goals? Right. The projection, it seems like, we better go up because things are getting worse. But is it a goal? That's a different.
Yeah, we talk about this in relation to the safety targets a lot too, and the way that TDOT has approached it has been very data driven, looking at the trend data and trying to say where is this taking us and what's a realistic number. So kind of interpreting a target different from a goal in my mind is.
So it's a projection. We're just trying to predict where we're going to be if we have the similar level of traffic and also infrastructure. Right.
Just knowing that these projects like the I-40 corridor out west, we know it's in the works, but we don't see that. Obviously, it's not going to be built by 2024. to really bring that number down. A lot of these are very difficult to quantify, direct correlation between a project implementation and what the number would be. I mean, that's the ultimate goal here with these, is to draw that direct line between your projects and hopefully making an impact on the measure. But the time frame is the big issue there. I would say on the bridge and pavement, that's the one that's directly correlated. We know if we spend $5 million on pavement this year, we're going to get this much improvement. But with these safety and the congestion, there's a lot of external factors at play that are hard for us to directly influence. But yeah, I think we're approaching this more as just for again, to get it before you guys, as the purpose of this is to get the information out there. And so you're aware of what's going on with the trend. I mean, we can.
So it's basically just anticipating where we'll be, not
Right.
saying.
Basically.
Because I mean, like, obviously we'd all like it to be,
Yeah, we definitely-
6.8 or so, but it's
Yeah.
not a goal. This is a
Correct.
prediction.
Yeah, Federal Highway
Okay.
doesn't want you to just set aspirational, meaningless targets. Yeah, obviously we want 0 peak hours of excessive delay, but a more realistic approach to it. And again, with that data, hopefully we can start to see what we can do, track that. So that was the peak hour excessive delay. The other was the non-single occupancy vehicle travel. So this is counterbalancing to the other. We want people not driving alone. And this has been improving, as this chart shows. This comes from census data, the American Community Survey. They track commuting patterns. They ask you, I think the question is, what's the mode of travel you use most frequently to get to work last week, whenever they did that. So it's broken down: the drive alone, carpool, public transportation, and we have CAT here. These numbers, so I picked the 5-year ACS before the pandemic, 2019, and these are 5-year averages, but this is the last year of the 5 years. So you can see that the drove alone is decreasing, which is good. And the primary driver of that is the working from home. We saw after COVID hit a big, obviously when in the middle of it, a lot of people working from home, and people continued to do so. So it's almost, the share of that has doubled basically from 5% in 2019 to over 10%. So those numbers are on the good side. It's like good news, bad news story today. We're not totally sure why the congestion is increasing if people are working from home. There's other things going on, obviously, more freight and population increase and other things like that. But the trend data, again, for this one, showing that great increase. We've realized now we were way too conservative on the 4-year target of 16.7%. So we're suggesting to revise that upwards to 21%, which is actually what the 2022 ACS shows. So we feel like at some point we're obviously going to hit a plateau with the working from home phenomenon, and some people are going back in the office, but I think it's here to stay to some degree. So we'll just have to again monitor that as we move forward. So in summary, in attachment number 4 is a resolution to formally adopt these targets. The other ones you'll be seeing early next year, the statewide targets for PM2 and 3. TDOT's working on finalizing their numbers for that. But this one, again, since we share this, a unique target for Knoxville, we have to get out ahead of that process. So we're asking for your adoption today of these 2 targets. If there's any questions or.
Yeah, I was wondering, aside from just being able to plan better, are there any incentives to, make improvements on this or have accurate projection? Like, what if we, found a way to get people to carpool more or whatever it is? Like, are there any incentives to encourage our region to make improvements on this?
Well, so this is tied directly. I don't know if I mentioned that specifically, but the subpart G is tied directly to CMAQ funding. So as an air quality, obviously we don't like to be in non-compliance for air quality standards, but one thing that does come with that is the congestion mitigation air quality funding comes to our area through TDOT. And so that's the funding we're using to fund these ATMS projects, like the Farragut one, I believe is like in the $8 million range. And Maryville Alcoa has a great system. We've been down there to see theirs. So that funding, I wouldn't say it's an incentive per se, but it's something that, the Federal Highway wants us to be able to document that those funds are going to projects to directly address this issue. There have never been any penalties, or, that question comes up a lot. What if you miss the target? Federal Highway's been kind of careful about saying, we won't take money away from you if you miss your target or things like that. The one I'm aware of is on safety. They force you to use your safety dollars for safety. I mean, there's a way to flex money out of that to other programs, but if you miss your target, they won't allow that flexibility. So that's really the only kind of things like that.
I've got a question.
Sure.
Is there a way that the data itself that's coming in to differentiate between local traffic and the traffic that's passing through our area? Is that possible, or do we know?
Not directly on this, but there are other data sources that can probably be used to look at that and then, analyze that. There's going to be a lot of data collection and things like that looked at for the TDOT I-40/75 corridor study. I know there's a major effort to, and the new data sources that TDOT's acquired to look at origin, destination, find out exactly what's going on. So, yeah. Any other questions?
Okay, so we'll need a motion to approve this.
Motion approved.
Second, anyone? Second, thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Mike.
All right, I'm still up here.
You're still up here, yeah. So Mike will also be presenting the Mobility Plan 2050 update. Go ahead,
Right.
please.
So this will be a pretty brief update. We had our consultant on the line for the technical committee meeting, went into more detail about some of this, but I'll just give a high-level overview of where we're at right now. So we're kind of nearing the wrapping up stages, I would say. It's a long process that started last fall and leading towards adoption by this group in the next April-May timeframe. So where we're at now, we've done our call for projects for all the jurisdictions and received those project applications. Many of them are projects that are in the current 2045 mobility plan. I realize we have a new folks here. This is a plan we update every 4 years, and it goes out at least 20 years. So projects that take a long time, a lot of times roll forward from one plan to the next. But there are some new projects, and we'll be evaluating all of these. I'll go into a little bit of that here in a minute. So as we go through that, we're also planning another round of public meetings coming up soon. And then, like I said, we're going into next spring for adoption. So getting into how we look at the projects and why we do it, there's prioritization method that we're trying to be as data-driven on as possible with these tools we have. It ties back to the Federal Highway requirements that we must address, the performance-based planning approach. So we're going to kind of bucket these projects into near, mid, and long-term priorities and do a scoring mechanism first, and then go out to each jurisdiction. We know that you can't directly quantify every project, and one may not match priorities of a local jurisdiction. So there will be opportunities for those folks to look at this as well. This is a reminder of the factors that we're scoring against. These are our goal areas, things like safety and congestion, and freight and economy, multimodal. So we've scored these on two different scales because we recognize projects are it's an apples and oranges. Somebody has a Greenway project and there's a TDOT I-40 widening project. It's kind of hard to compare those two projects together. So we actually weighted these goal areas depending on the size, the small or large. And so kind of what, safety is number one on the local side, whereas congestion is actually the highest score for the larger projects. So we're going to put all the projects in there and try to evaluate. A lot of it's using GIS data and overlaying the projects on this information and seeing, how does it correlate with things like business locations for the economy factor or other things. Derive a numeric score. This is another. We've had public input, people providing their input on an interactive map, and we'll use that as well. And so this kind of just this is not our factors, this is another plan the consultant showed us, but kind of normalize all these factors and then Then you run it through the weighting factor, like I showed, the 21% safety and so forth. And then you spit out a final number here. But again, this is not the end all be all. This is a starting point for further discussions of the project prioritization. So our immediate next steps are public meeting round 2. We're in the midst of finalizing that. I almost had the exact dates, kind of have them tentative. I didn't want to put them on the slide because they're not completely finalized, but we're looking at definitely the week of October 21st, at least having one in Knoxville, downtown area, most likely the O'Connor Senior Center, and then one at Maryville again, at the Blount County Public Library. And then we're happy to come out to other areas. We'll be looking at opportunities in the other counties, in Loudoun County, Anderson County. So if you guys know of any, especially if there's like another meeting going on that we could piggyback with. A lot of times folks don't get too excited about a long-range plan meeting. So the attendance can be kind of hard to drive. So if there's other things going on, that's usually helpful. So that's a quick update of where we're at on the long-range plan. Any questions?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I missed, but I was looking. Do you have an agenda for the public meeting that's already set, that the specific issues you're going to be talking about, like projects, whether it's the Pellissippi extension or the choice lanes, or is there?
So it'll be more general. We've got a draft. It's not really an agenda as far as the meeting's not going to have a starting and end point and things. It's going to be more of an open house style setup with stations where you can view the projects that are being proposed and how they've been prioritized so far to provide your input on, if public's input on that, and just other information stations. So that's all being still worked out. But as far as, it's not like a specific time for a presentation or things like that. So I hope that answers.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, thanks.
Next on the agenda is TDOT and Federal Highway Administration updates.
We're going to start with Christy. Christy Brown's our Director of Pre-Construction.
You can do the pointer.
Oh, okay, right here.
Red dot.
Yep. Good morning. So I'm going to give a brief overview of the FY25 resurfacing projects. So the map you're looking at, we've got the TPO area kind of shaded here in the center of the map, kind of this tan color. The blue boxes are actually projects that fall within the TPO area. And then we've also included some projects with the yellow boxes that are outside the TPO area that we thought might be of interest. So I'm just going to kind of briefly go around. I know that may be hard to read, so I'll kind of read that off. So starting at the top, up here, the first blue box is Anderson County. It's State Route 61, which is Oliver Springs Highway, from State Route 62, North Illinois Avenue, to State Route 95, the Oak Ridge Turnpike. That is currently in the March 25 letting, and that's just an overlay project. Moving over to the next blue box, and another Anderson County resurfacing, State Route 61, Charles G. Severs Boulevard from the Clinch River Bridge to near Buffalo Road. That is in the February letting, and it's actually a Mill and D project. So moving on over to the next blue box, it's a Knox County, State Route 33, North Broadway and Maynardville Pike from near Rose Avenue to near Regal Lane. It's in the February letting, and it's another Mill and D project. The blue box below that, another Knox County job, State Route 1, Hall of Fame Drive and East Magnolia Avenue from near Historic Preservation Drive to State Route 168, Asheville Highway. That is a May letting, and that's another Mill and D. So the next couple projects are the yellow boxes. Again, that's technically outside the TPO area, but we did want to include those. Sevier County, State Route 35, Newport Highway from Bridge over Little Pigeon River to near Sims Road. That's a May letting, just an overlay. Yes.
What's Mill and D?
I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's all right.
So we'll go through and we'll actually mill off. We'll remove about 1.25 inches and put another 1.25 inches on. The overlays, we just come through and do about 1.25 inches.
So it's what they're doing in 640, basically, as
Yeah.
far as grinding the entire road
Yes,
up for
yeah.
resurfacing. Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry.
We have a list of acronyms that ain't on it. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. This bottom yellow box, another Sevier County project from State Route 339, Jones Cove Road, from Ode Newport Highway to the Cott County line. It's an Aegean letting, and it's just a simple overlay. So kind of coming over to the left of the screen, we have a Blount County project, State Route 336, Brick Mill Road and 4 Mile Road from near US 411 to near Reagan Mill Road. That's a March 25 letting, and it's an overlay. This last blue box is Loudoun County, State Route 72 from the Monroe County line to Get Good Hollow Road. It's a May letting, and it's another overlay project. The last three are again outside the TPO area, but we did want to include those. We have a Roane County, State Route 1, US 27, Kingston Highway from near State Route 326, Gallagher Road to the near the Loudoun County line. That's a February letting, another overlay. And then a Roane County, State Route 1, US 27, Gateway Avenue from State Route 29, US 70 to near State Route 61, US 70, February letting, and it's a mill and D. And then the last project is Roane, State Route 61. It's up here at the top of the screen. South Roane Street from near I-40, exit 347 to near State Route 29, Ruritan Road. And that's in a December letting, and it is a mill and D project as well. So that's just a real brief view of what's coming up for resurfacing for FY25. Is there any other questions about that?
Christie, could you explain, you're talking about the different letting dates so everyone has an idea. You had a December letting date and a February letting date when those come through. So we'll let those, what's the rough timeline on when they'll see the rollers and the asphalt machine show up?
So typically, I think we have the pre-con about 4 to 6 weeks after the letting, and then that's where we'll work up the schedule. So, Steve, would you say a couple months?
Yeah.
Do you want to?
There's a microphone up here. So with those, we usually have a sliding area within those lettings for the contractor, because obviously the same contractors may have, you have 4 or 5 contractors may have 6 or 7 jobs apiece. So we construct our contract to where they have a start date, but they have kind of a sliding area where they can start to manage their resources better. So, but typically you're about 6 weeks out on that, and then pavement limitations for seasonal limitations, obviously depending on the weather and stuff, that dictates a little bit. But usually around April, you start seeing some of those December projects, people starting to gear up and do that, because most of them pull their plants down around February and January to do maintenance. So that'll give you kind of that rough timeline. And then you'll see a whole lot of paving between April and usually around October is when they really make hay on that.
Did you have a question?
I do. It's probably an unpopular question for you guys, but for us here sitting at this table, I'm sure every single person here has had this question. Do you have something that we can send people to whenever potholes arrive, or something when you're resurfacing in those specific small areas, so people actually know that we're getting those done? Because I get that question all the time. Is there somewhere we could direct them to, or since we're talking about resurfacing?
Yeah, there's actually a site where they can go to. It's TDOT Fix. I think that's right. I'm not real good with all those things. The acronyms for me get me too. It's a TDOT Fix site, and I can send that. We can send an email out to all of y'all so you can send it to your constituents. But what that does, it goes to a call center. There's a lot of different ways to get information. A lot of times, I know for us as joint partners, sometimes the city will get something from their site, and then they'll send it over to us. So there's a lot of different ways it can actually go into our offices. They pick up a phone and call. Those are out there, but there's also a website though that they can put in to a TDOT Fix site, and then from there it gets generated to our staff, and then it gets documented into our system. So then we have a start when we get it, and then we have a closure time when we patch the pothole. So that all gets put in there. So yes, and I can
I'll get it to Troy, and Troy can send it out to the group, if that works all right, Troy. That way, all of y'all will have that for your areas to make sure if you got folks that are getting calls, that they can do that. So,
Christy, you may have let some of the people know the differential of why you choose one over the other as far as the Mill D versus the overlay.
So each year we ride the state routes, and then they look at the condition of the pavement. And our materials and test office now works with us, and they determine like what kind of treatment is needed based on the age of the pavement and then the condition. So, Steve,
yeah.
anything else?
Yeah, there's a lot of factors that do fall in there. Obviously, ADTs can be a part of it. The more traffic you got, the longevity of your pavements is shorter. So sometimes that may require milling off the surface, right, and getting into those sublayers. A lot of times on our interstates, you'll see more of a reconstruction where we're getting all the way into the binder level after a time. But there's an evaluation. We look at the condition of the surface, also subsurface conditions, and do a little bit of investigation and try to get the best thing that will maximize our dollars across our system. We use a lot of different things from the mill and D is typically when you've got more distress in your pavements. The overlay, as you talked about, usually our surfaces are pretty good shape, but we need to obviously put a new surface on it because it's got age, oxidation, some of that distress. But you also can get polishing of the aggregate. For the safety side of it, you want to make sure you have a good surface for skid. And then we stretch dollars also. A lot of times you'll see in some of these, you'll see what we call a thin lift. It's still a traditional asphalt overlay, but instead of being 135 pounds, when we look at the traffic and the longevity of the pavements, we can go to an 85 or 105 pound mix. And then there's some other things out there, pavement preservations like microsurfacing as well. So, but there's a whole evaluation process where we do the pavements. There's a I guess a data-driven approach and then an observation of expertise as well that goes into that.
Hey, thank you. I think everybody has good understanding now.
I had a question also on the same topic. Do you also take into account, there's some roads that are, state routes in Knoxville that have been resurfaced, over the last 5 decades, and then there's no curb anymore,
Right.
and so, and then the sidewalk isn't very safe feeling if the curb has gone. So how do you take that into account? I'm thinking of Broadway.
Yeah, that is another factor too. So when we go in, a lot of times, obviously, you can't keep stacking the asphalt up, as you mentioned, Mayor. And so a lot of times that will generate a mill, not necessarily the condition of the pavements, but the condition of the roadway when you, right, you can't have it above the sidewalk, right? So obviously you want to reclaim that curb. So that's a lot of times we're doing that as well. We look at crossfalls too. Sometimes we can do it more economically. Sometimes we'll do like the 2 outside lanes and then taper them. And that helps a little bit financially and you still get a decent crossfall on it. But yes, you're exactly right. We have to go in and ever so often we have to reclaim those curbs so that our sidewalks and everything function the way they're supposed to.
I think also at the tech committee, didn't he say this is an opportunity that if you wanted something restriped a little bit differently, if a project's in your area to let y'all know in advance?
Absolutely. And we're real creative. And I will say this for our staff. We look at resurfacing not just the road itself as a maintenance activity, but it's also an opportunity to analyze the road. So we do a 3-year plan. 3 years out, we're looking at it with our traffic operations. You're looking at pedestrian stuff. You're looking at operations. Do I need a turn lane somewhere? And then we'll start formulating plans. Year 2, we're usually implementing if I have to do a little bit of widening and stuff, real low cost stuff, but I'm able to actually greatly improve operation. A lot of times we went in some cases we've done road diets doing that because we looked at the traffic and the accident history. Sometimes we go from a super 2-lane to a 3-lane section for operations. We're doing that on State Route 35 there in Sevierville. But by doing that, you can maximize those dollars so that is appropriate. That's the time to really have that dialogue. That's one of the reasons we would like for y'all to see our 3-year plan and it's out there. That way, if there's things that even in your community, you say, hey, we've got something going in here. Maybe we can partner together and add something in front of that resurfacing project to maximize our, we're all trying to stretch our dollars, right? So that's one way we can do that.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Yep, I have a couple things I want to add, if you don't mind. First thing I wanted to do is give you an update on the Way in Motion project that is going to be happening here. This was announced at the TC that this project has a date now of starting. Nothing's really changed from the TC, but that project should be started sometime in October. So look forward to that. Way in Motion. Yes, I'm sorry. WIM, W-I-M. I-40/75 study update. There's not a lot to talk about other than we did have our kickoff meeting on that last week. The consultant reached out to some of the initial project team stakeholders and requested the data that they would like to use to start the initial analysis. We'll provide more updates every time we meet, just to give you a heads up on how that project is progressing. And I think that's important to everybody in here, so that will be a topic for a few months at least.
What's the expected timeline on that?
Of completion, I think it's 18 months.
Okay, thank you.
18? Yeah.
It's got 2 phases to it.
Right.
The first one is 18 months. And we have actually started work. One thing that you'll see in and around the area, we'll have lane closures at night, some traffic things you may have noticed. Rain's kind of slowed us down, but we've started our mobile LiDAR, so we're actually picking up data across that whole area with our surveying right now. So we're hitting the ground running with that so that we can meet those goals. So we'll have some good solutions out there.
Let's see, what else did I have? So I mentioned the August redistribution. The other thing I wanted to mention was the statewide partnership program. That, as you know, that application period closed in August 30th. We received statewide a total of 76 applications. 7 were in Knoxville. The list has been given to the TPO right now. What we're doing is vetting that list. What we're asking from the MPOs at this moment is to make sure that these applications that were in your region were vetted through the MPO like we had asked, the TPO. And we'd also like to make sure that those projects are consistent with your current plan. That's what we're asking for right now. When the list is vetted and we have a much better understanding of which projects can kind of move forward into the next phase, we're going to reach out with an email at some point asking the TPO to provide a list of projects that they felt should have been included in the SPP application but weren't. This is a way of giving us an idea of how much of that ask is still out there, and this could be something that we could use to take to the legislature at some point to maybe ask for more dollars at some point. But that is my update from the planning side of things.
Could you please explain how Way in Motion works?
So the Way in Motion program is, as you know, the way station that's out here on 40, trucks have to pull in and sit on a physical scale as they're monitored. And then, if they are acceptable, they will be able to get back onto the interstate. The Way in Motion project will measure that weight in motion. I mean, it is devices, scales that are embedded in the pavement with some smart technology to help communicate whether or not those vehicles are in compliance with the weight standards. If they're not, they have to pull off and receive whatever direction citations they need to have. But it's a way of keeping traffic moving as opposed to the on and off that trucks have to do every once in a while. One other thing that it will do, I'm sorry, it's going to add a lot more of we can count traffic with it, so we'll be able to have a better idea of functional classification. And so it has multiple benefits, but mostly it's just to keep the traffic moving.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Does that mean that the way station at Watt Road will be no longer?
That is part of the I-40/75 study, but there needs to still be a physical building in place for Way in Motion, because without it, there's nowhere to pull people off and have that conversation. So
You eliminate the deceleration and acceleration, get back on the interstate with the big trucks.
I have a question. Is there any way to get for the new board members an update to everybody on some of the things that we've talked about over the last year and a half, like the Edgemore Road project, Emory Road project, the Way in Motion project, the new route that we talked about with Senator Massey, not Orange Route or whatever it's called now. But is there any way to get our top 10, 15 things that we've talked about so everybody can kind of get up to speed Is there a way to do that just to, and honestly, to reconnect so I can remember everything that's going on?
I mean, we could try to do it sort of a TPO reset in a way to just bring people up to speed. I think we could also, at some point, ask the consultants that are doing the 4075 to come in and give more of an overall presentation on what the scope is and what we're looking at this point. I don't know if we're ready to do that yet or not, but.
I also think the new 10-year plan, every year there'll be a new 10-year plan, right? So there could be there'll be some discussions around those projects. And I know y'all are going back and forth. Remember, we used to have to rank projects. Y'all are going back and forth about exactly what you want from us. I know some MPOs, regardless of whether TDOT says, hey, we want something, they're going ahead and putting together a list of their top priorities.
Yeah.
So we could do something like that, and that would help have this conversation around these projects out there.
Yeah, not all MPOs provide a ranked list of projects in their plan. So, and what you all are talking about right now is putting them into those tiers is similar to what they kind of do. They're stuck in their horizon years if their air quality, if there's an air quality issue. But we would like to try to find a way to make it less intrusive for asking for these types of projects and having to go year after year asking the same thing about ranking your projects. If there is something in place, which it looks like there will be, it'll be a lot easier for us to just go to your plan and try to have that conversation. And schedule and cost are components that are still part of that decision, but.
And I know Troy's always been willing to try to get us a presentation or an update, so it may be that we have to break them out over a series of meetings, but we could maybe tackle one every meeting or something like that.
I know that I got asked about choice lanes, and I feel like that we talked about that here a year ago, and that caught some media coverage just a couple months ago. So like stuff like that for the new board members would probably be pretty important.
Choice lanes are part of the I-4075 project scope as well, just looking into that.
Sorry to keep peppering you with questions and putting you on the spot.
Did I miss an acronym?
No, that's fine. So with the choice lanes, it's my understanding that the I-75/40 corridor, there's like when the contractors or the companies are looking at this, there's like equity in the road by the investment that the state's made or something. How does that work?
Well,
yeah, it's weird, but like they consider that goes into the consideration of choosing where the choice lane goes.
Yeah,
I believe.
I mean, it's probably not something to talk about at this point. I mean, it's much more complicated than it is because there is private investment and there is the conversation with these concessionaires about how they will operate through this public-private partnership. And they could be different for every area. Right now, the one that's being pushed forward is I-24 in the Nashville area. That's the one that's sort of the front and center choice lane project. But as like I said, the 4075 project that will be conducted here will look into the choice lanes as an option and try to bring that more detail into the recommendations and things that come out of that study.
But TDOT actually doesn't say, hey, we want one here and want one here. You actually have to work
Correct.
with
the concepts were put in place when the TMA was developed about where they think they might be useful. And Knoxville was one of those areas, but with the I-24 smart corridor that was already in place in Nashville, they thought this would be the most effective and quickest way to start looking at choice lanes.
That's very informative. Thank you. I'm sorry, Mayor Buchanan.
Yeah, just a slightly different topic. I think I wasn't able to attend the last meeting. Did someone, has this board been updated on the climate pollution reduction grant? Did you do that last time? Maybe I wasn't.
We mentioned it at the tech. I have it
Okay.
as to mention it under the under other business here.
Oh, okay. Well, great. Then I'll let you do it.
Okay.
So any other questions for TDOT or? Okay, thank you. So move on to other business. Doug, did you want to cover that?
Okay, first, just real quick, the next technical committee meeting is October 15th. I know we have some of our technical committee members here. That's a week later than usual because the week before is fall break for many of the schools. So just keep that in mind, it's a week later. And then the executive board would be on October 23rd. And then as Mayor Kincannon said, this area did get an EPA climate pollution reduction grant. The city of Knoxville got it, and Knoxville, Knox County Planning and the TPOe are partners with them. This grant actually covers the MSA, so it's a larger area than just the TPO area. And there's already been some work going on over the last year. There's a working group, and I did want to announce there's on October 24th, there'll be a working group meeting. We don't have the location and time yet, but many of your jurisdictions, not all of you, but some of you are signed on to participate in this, and I would highly encourage that your staff participate. But as you know, with transportation is one of the biggest.
It's the biggest.
Is the biggest producer of greenhouse gases, so it's very important that we be involved. But there's also things like our built environment, agriculture, energy. All of these help produce greenhouse gas, which is just not great for our area. So we really want to meet with you guys, whether through the working group process or part of our strategy will be to come out and talk to you individually. And also, we're also looking to have some meetings out in the community. If we can find piggyback options, that would be great too. But we want to come up with some real solutions on how to, reduce greenhouse gases. And Knox Planning, we have hired a consultant to help us with this. They're already doing a MSA community-wide survey, and it's actually going really well. They're getting a lot of responses back, and that's going to help us know how much the citizens are aware of this and what type of ideas they have. So it's a really important project, and it's really going to start picking up momentum here in the fall. So we just want to make you aware of it. I don't know if you want to add anything else to that. But.
Well, I would just say, while the city of Knoxville was the applicant, it is for the whole metro statistical area. And just like our roads, they go through our areas. I mean, our air, there are no boundaries. And if you have a family member with asthma or COPD or, don't want your family or friends to get those things, then air quality is just something that is important to all of us. We're held accountable as far as the federal grants, and we're an attainment area. Is that what it's called? Attainment area. So aside from just our personal and community interest in good health, it affects our grant funding and stuff as well. And I would say that according to what I've learned is the three main sectors that contribute to air pollution are buildings, waste, and transportation. But in the Knoxville MSA, transportation is like 60% of it. I mean, it's the biggest contributor to air quality problems. So the TPO is a really big, important lever to alleviate that as well. So there's a survey. I think the survey could be shared with TPO. It's out there.
Yes,
and takes about less than 10 minutes.
Yeah. If we haven't sent it out already, we'll send it out. So then I had one more thing. I did want to just recognize that the city of Knoxville lost a very important citizen advocate, Christy Kirk. She never really came in front of this board. I don't know if you've seen her there's been a lot of news stories. She did a lot in the community with education, but she was also the chair of the Knoxville Transportation Authority, and Isaac and I worked with her quite a bit. And she was a real passionate advocate about public transit. And so I just wanted to let people know, if you hadn't seen in the paper, that she passed. And I don't know if her family or friends watch this on CTV, but I did want to just let them know that we're thinking about them and how important she was to the public transit here in Knoxville. So.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any other business? Okay. Now we'll move on to the public comment section. Members of the public may address the Technical Committee with a 5-minute time limit for each person. Has anyone signed up, or is anyone here? All right. Seeing none, unless there is an objection, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.